Hello and welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I'm your host Deepak. I'm honored to welcome Professor Christian Busch, a business professor at the USC Marshall School of Business and an affiliated researcher at the London School of Economics, as our esteemed guest on today's podcast episode. Professor Christian Busch's research focuses on purpose-driven leadership, sustainable innovation, and serendipity. His work has been published in esteemed journals such as the Strategic Management Journal, Journal of Management Studies, Strategic Entrepreneurship Journal, Journal of Business Venturing, Harvard Business Review, Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice, and MIT Sloan Management Review. His insights have also been featured by leading media outlets, including the Financial Times, Forbes, and the BBC. Professor Busch has received multiple Best Paper Awards from the Academy of Management, along with Massini Award for Innovative Scholarship. He serves on the editorial review board of Academy of Management Perspectives and is a guest editor for a strategic management journal special issue on serendipity, chance, and luck in management and strategy. Additionally, he is a blogger for Psychology Today and a recognized subject matter expert for the Academy of Management. He is the best-selling author of The Serendipity Mindset, a book praised by Ariana Huffington as wise, exciting, and life-changing, and endorsed by Paul Polman, former CEO of Unilever, as providing excellent practical guidance for all. The book has been translated into 12 languages. Previously, Professor Busch taught at the New York University and the London School of Economics. He co-founded Leaders on Purpose and Sandbox Network, served as a co-director of LSE's Innovation Lab, and is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. He has been recognized among Capital's top 40 under 40 and included in the Thinkers 50 radar list of management thinkers most likely to shape the future. In 2018, he received LSE's Teaching Excellence Award for co-creating and leading a new course. And in 2015, he was invited to give the LSE commencement address. Professor Busch's professional experience spans business and consulting across Mexico, Germany, the UK, South Africa, and the US. He has guest lectured at Peking University, Stanford, and Strathmore Business School. A frequent keynote speaker, he has addressed conferences such as the World Economic Forum, TEDx, and the Financial Times Summit. He has also collaborated with senior leadership teams at MasterCard, Siemens, GSK, DP World, General Electric, Unilever, UBS, and Boston Consulting Group. Professor Busch holds a PhD and MSc in Management from the London School of Economics and Political Science. In this episode, Professor Christian Busch will provide insights from his widely acclaimed book, The Serendipity Mindset, The Art and Science of Creating Good Luck. So without further delay, let's welcome Professor Christian Busch to the podcast. Professor Christian Busch, it's an honor and privilege to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Professor, the term serendipity is often associated with luck or chance. How do you define serendipity in your book and how it is different from mere luck?
Yeah, that's a great question because usually when we think about luck, right, we think about something that just happens to us. And then it creates a lot of societal inequality because some people just have more luck than others based on being in the right place at the right time. But serendipity is active luck. It's the smart luck that we create through our own actions in how we correspond to the unexpected. So take the example, right? If you have slightly erratic hand movements like I do, imagine you're in a coffee shop and you accidentally spill a coffee over the person next to you. And that person looks at you slightly annoyedly, but you sense there might be something there. And now you have a couple of options, right? One option is you just say, I'm so sorry. You walk outside and you think, what could have happened had I spoken with a person? Option number two, you start that conversation and that person becomes the love of your life or your next partner or collaborator, you name it. The point is how we react to the unexpected is what shapes next. And so serendipity really is this interaction between chance and human agency.
You argue that serendipity isn't just randomness, but something we can cultivate. So what are some key habits or mindset that enable individuals to create more serendipity in their lives?
Well, there's three favorite strategies I have. One is the hook strategy, which is about how do you create potentiality. So for example, if you go to a conference and someone asks you this dreaded, so what do you do question, instead of just answering, hey, I'm Christian, I'm a professor at a university, I would say something like, hey, I'm Christian, I'm researching serendipity, but what I'm really excited about is learning about parenting because I have a 3-year-old, and also I really love hiking, right? And so what I'm giving you here is 3 potential data points where you could be like, oh my God, such a coincidence. I also have a toddler. Let's talk. Oh my God, such a coincidence. My brother has a hiking company. Maybe you could do something with it, right? So the point is that we can create more of these potential serendipity triggers and make it more likely that serendipity happens. So strategy number 1. Strategy number 2 is really learning to connect the dots, because serendipity is so much about seeing some sort of association. So you can train your mind to do that, right? That's the beauty of neuroplasticity. And so, for example, you can tell yourself the next 10 times you're in a meeting, contribute one idea or one connection to people. And as you do that, your brain starts to recognize more and more connections, and you start to make more and more of those unexpected connections as well. And then third is really, the question, how do you ask questions? Do you ask questions like, what do you do? Or do you ask things like, what do you enjoy doing? It's a very small shift in questioning, but what it does is it gets away from putting people into a box and say, I put a label on you, to let me understand your motivations. Let me understand what makes you tick. And then it's much more likely that we have unexpected overlaps.
How can organizations foster a culture where serendipity thrives, leading to greater innovation and success?
There's a couple of strategies. One of the ones that I find most effective is to first think about how can I create the psychological safety for people to bring in their ideas, to make their ideas count, but then really think about what are the practices that make it more likely that now people actually exchange their ideas. So for example, the project funeral is about saying whenever a project doesn't work out, a team reflects together on why it didn't work out, and then lays it to rest together. And if everyone does that, so it's not just one person who's kind of like vulnerable, but it's actually everyone kind of reflects a little bit on a project that didn't work out for them, then a lot of times what happens is that people might say, oh my God, like this idea didn't work in your context, but have you considered putting this into another context? And so you will a lot of times see serendipity emerge from this idea that an idea that doesn't work in one context might actually work in another. A second strategy I'm a big fan of is to ask the simple question in the weekly meeting: what surprised you last week? It's a very simple question, but if you ask people what surprised you last week, they start to look out for the unexpected, not only as a threat, but also as the source of new ideas, of potential innovation, right? And so, let's say you tell your people, hey, what surprised you last week? That you do that the next week, and they might say, hey, it really surprised us that our incentive system doesn't work with the new generations. Or it really surprised me that our users use our washing machine not for clothes but for potatoes, right? And then you might come up with a potato washing machine. And so it's all those things where in a way you can make people look out for the unexpected. But then third, and most importantly, I think, especially as a leader, you want to make sure that you legitimize the unexpected as something that's a natural part of our plans, of our lives. We always kind of try to, map a lot out. I'm German, of course, I enjoy strategy and planning, but then real life is a little bit more like a squiggle, right? And so as a leader, if I start telling stories less like we planned this and then this happened, and more like we planned this, then we created a culture that allowed us to find even better ideas. And now we have an even better strategy, or, now I'm in an even better position. Now I'm legitimizing the idea that the unexpected is important and actually an important source of information.
You draw from diverse fields like biology, chemistry, and management to explain serendipity. Can you share an example from science or business that illustrate how serendipity leads to breakthrough discoveries?
Yeah, so one of my favorite examples is the sweet potato washing machine, where, a couple of years ago, a big company in China, they produce refrigerators and washing machines, and they received calls from farmers. And the farmers told them, your crappy washing machine is always breaking down. Why is the washing machine breaking down? Well, we're trying to wash our potatoes in it, and it doesn't seem to work. Now, what would we usually do? We'd probably say, don't wash your potatoes in the washing machine. That's against our plans. What they did is exactly the opposite. They said, you know what, that's unexpected, but there's probably a lot of farmers in the world who have a similar problem. So why don't we build in a better dirt filter and make it a potato washing machine? And that's how that became a new product and a new innovation. And I think that's kind of what you will see a lot of times in science, right? When, for example, we know that around 50-60% of when researchers hand in grants, that when you look at when they handed in the grant versus what actually happened, change. And a lot of that is serendipitous, right? That they might work on something and then realize, oh my God, the real question is more this than this, right? And so I think that's the beauty. And I think a lot of researchers will see that in their own life, that they might have had a certain plan of what they want to write about, but then serendipity might take them somewhere else. I had a senior executive in one of my classes yesterday, and she presented her CV, and she said this beautiful thing where she said, well, my CV is essentially mostly where I fell in love with someone, and then I went there, and then I somehow found a job there. And of course, I would never say that in an interview, but a lot of times the unexpected plays a bigger role than we might want to admit.
What role does cognitive flexibility play in recognizing and leveraging serendipitous opportunities?
Extremely important, because if you think about how often you might miss serendipity in your life because you have this functional fixedness, right? Where you essentially, the hammer nail problem, where if you have a nail that you want to get in the wall, you will always look for a hammer if you only grew up with hammers. But if you step back and say, well, what does it actually take to put the nail in the wall? You might recognize that you can use a lot of different heavy objects to get it in the wall. And so it's really this kind of idea that once you step back and have more cognitive flexibility, to not get wedded to one particular approach, but think about what is the actual problem I'm trying to solve. That's where the magic happens. I think that's why approaches like design thinking and so are so effective, because you're getting away from this is the one solution that we think will work to what's the actual problem we're solving, and then rubber stamping towards that.
Professor, are there any neurological or psychological mechanism that help people better recognize and act on serendipitous moments?
Yeah, I think I'm very fascinated by neuroplasticity, especially, right? This idea that you can literally rewire your brain into seeing more overlaps, into being more open to things. And so I think we should think about serendipity similar to how we think about going to the gym, right? That we can literally build a muscle for the unexpected. And the more we do that, the more we can rewire our brain and make a lot of beautiful serendipity happen. And then you will realize that a lot of people who seem to be very lucky are just really good at connecting the dots. They're really good at spotting them and then doing something with it. And so I think, I hope that a lot of people will do that.
How can individuals apply the principles of serendipity in their personal and professional lives? Do you have a simple framework or exercise to help people get started?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. At the beginning of our conversation, we talked about strategies that we can all use. But I think the first step a lot of times is to also go deeper into what's actually holding you back from having more in your life, and then working on the deeper psychological undercurrents. So, for example, you might ask yourself, when in my life could serendipity have happened, but it didn't? And what was the thing behind it, right? So let's say, for example, in my case, I might be, oh yeah, I had this amazing unexpected idea in a meeting, but I didn't bring it in because I didn't feel ready, worthy, you name it. And then I walked outside and think, oh my God, I wish I had brought in that question. Or, you sit in the subway and you flirt with a person, but then you didn't speak with her or him. And then you think, oh my God, what could have happened? And so when you look at those different occasions in the past, you're not thinking about, oh, I will regret this and this. You're thinking about the pattern. And you think about, okay, if the pattern is, for example, fear of rejection, now I can work on that pattern. I can work on putting myself into low risk rejection modes, right? I can put myself into situations where I know I might get rejected, but it's low risk, right? So I don't know, going into a coffee shop and saying, hey, I heard, I would love to have a free coffee from you today, right? Just something that where you know that most likely a person will say no. But A, then you realize, oh, it's not as bad. And B, it's surprising how many times people will actually give you a free coffee, right? So it's the funny thing that when you ask for something, you might actually get it also. But the long story short is, I think training the rejection muscle is extremely important to then overcome your potential barriers to serendipity on the one hand, but then also you can look out in your life whenever you had serendipity happen. What is the pattern in those moments where you have serendipity happen, and how can you do more of that?
Professor, can you share a real world example of someone who transformed an unexpected event into a life changing opportunity using the serendipity mindset?
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, I think a lot of times we think about the big life-changing things, and we will have a lot of people who will say, oh my God, yes, like I can apply those hooks now, or things like that. But I think it's also the day-to-day that actually is a really interesting thing. So for example, I had a gamer, right, who I had just talked with about the hook strategy. He would go to a gaming conference, and usually whenever someone asks him, so what do you do? He would just say, oh, I'm this and this, and I'm a gaming producer, or I'm a gaming entrepreneur. This time he said, you know what? I'm a gaming entrepreneur, but what I'm really excited about is black holes in the universe and metaverse and things like all these kind of like things that he was really excited about. And so he said that someone, that person said, oh my God, such a coincidence. Finally, someone who's interested in black holes as well. So they are nerding out for an hour about black holes. And after an hour, that person says, you know what? I really like you. How can I help you? And that person turns out to be this amazing investor who then, can make a lot of stuff happen for that person. If you were to go to that person and just pitch your company, yeah, you are one of 1,000 people. But if you're the one person who actually connects with that person over shared interest that's unexpectedly emerging, now you're one out of 1,000, right? And so I think that's kind of the beautiful thing, that the more we do those kind of practices in the day to day, the more we have all these coincidences that at hindsight, actually, you will realize there's a lot of dots that we connected ourselves.
How can entrepreneurs and business leaders use serendipity as a competitive advantage in today's rapidly changing world?
I think it starts with really setting the tone at the top and really making people aware that, look, we cannot know everything. And if you pretend as a leader that you know everything, you'll fail. Like that's the old school leadership is, I pretend I know everything and my authority comes from knowing everything. Everyone knows that's not possible. Everyone now can fact check you in a meeting with AI and say, that doesn't make sense, this forecast. Like AI tells me this just won't work and this is just, BS. And so the thing here is, I think that leading from the top with this idea of, hey, look, we're planning as much as we can, but also we're then building the unexpected into our planning, and then we'll have an even better plan. I think that is the absolute first step to really build a culture where people feel empowered to act on the unexpected, rather than try to hide unexpected information because it threatens the authority of a leader or things like that. And so I think creating a healthy culture for serendipity is at the absolute core of being successful in a fast changing world.
In the book, you discuss how connecting seemingly unrelated dots can create new opportunities. So, how can people train themselves to develop the skills?
Well, I think, and so we have a Serendipity workbook actually, which might be interesting for your listeners. Please, reach out if that's of interest, where you can literally walk yourself through all these practices. And I'm a big fan of really doing that, similar to like going to the gym, that you really start with kind of like the low-hanging fruits, right? Start with things like the hook strategy, like the things we just talked about, and then you progressively do more and more. And then you try to look at your serendipity score. So how much serendipity, how high is your serendipity quotient before you do that and after that? And it's amazing how much shift there can be.
Has the rise of digital technologies and remote work affected our ability to experience serendipity? And how can we recreate the water cooler moments that often sparks innovation?
Well, I mean, what's interesting about Zoom and everything is that it's your personal private plane, right? Like I can be in your living room just like this. Like we probably wouldn't have been able to speak with each other for a very long time hadn't we had this wonderful opportunity of connecting virtually. And so I think there's a lot of debate about, serendipity is being killed because we don't have the water cooler moments. And I completely agree with this. There's nothing better than after a meeting having that conversation at the water cooler or the coffee desk, and then, oh my God, such a coincidence this. Having said that, I also think we can try to recreate as much of this online by the things we just said, that the culture and things like that play a big role. That, for example, when you have a staff meeting, why not have people introduce themselves at the beginning with a couple of hooks and just kind of like, get a bit of a feel for where people are at the moment. So I think a lot of the practices we just discussed, you can also take into the online world.
Professor, how does cultural background influence the way people perceive and act on serendipity? Do some cultures foster serendipity better than others?
Well, it's interesting because you will have take the German culture, right? So Germans love planning, so you will see that in a planning culture, you might not naturally have as much serendipity in the day to day because people love the planning piece. Versus you might be in a in Kenya, for example, right, where I do a lot of work, like you constantly have unexpected moments because that's just part of daily life, that there is the unexpected happening. And I think there's pros to both, and I think there's the best of both worlds that the most interesting entrepreneurs are living, where they say, okay, let's take the best of the planning approach. We want to plan as much as we can. We want to build the unexpected into the planning, but then also we have the open mind to actually change our plan if something happens. And so I think that's kind of where the most interesting overlaps happen. I think that's where, I'm always thinking, when you think about around the world, right? Kenya, Bangalore, you name it, like all these kind of cities where I've been doing a lot of research, you will see that you will have a lot of kind of wonderful serendipity happen. And I think as an organization, then the question is, how do you capture that? Because if you have too much serendipity happen, then you might get distracted. If you have too little, you might not be ready for innovation. So I think then planning with serendipity is the key.
With AI playing a larger role in decision making, do you think machines can ever be programmed to facilitate serendipity, or is it uniquely human trait?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because we're just at the moment finalizing a paper on that intersection, and essentially our core premise is that AI is really good at targeted innovation, right? Really good at like saying, let's improve this, let's improve this, let's improve this. But serendipitous innovation a lot of times comes from meaning making in the local context, right? That I need to see something that is an anomaly, something that's unexpected, and then meaning make it in my context so that I can get buy-in from other people for that change in schema, that's change in where we thought we were going. And that a lot of times requires kind of meaning making that at this point, the element of surprise is still quite human, right? That you're surprised by something, but then also you want to meaning make it into that. And so I think there's a really interesting place for AI to help accelerate serendipity by allowing AI to intersect with humans that can meaning make the information of surprises. And so I think that's kind of where the scaled serendipity will come from.
You mentioned that fear of uncertainty can block serendipity. How can individuals and organizations become more comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity?
It's interesting because, like I said, I grew up in a very uncertainty avoiding culture, and I don't like ambiguity. I don't think like that many people actually like ambiguity or change, right? Everyone talks about change and innovation, but when it affects you, you're like, well, let's maybe do that with others. And so I think that the kind of interesting thing is to get into that mindset of thinking about, okay, in my life, where do the good things actually come from? And you might realize that a lot of the good things come from the unexpected, even if in the first place it presents itself as a bad thing. And I think that's kind of like something that I found extremely important in life to think about that. For example, right? Imagine you break up with your or there's an unexpected breakup, your girlfriend or boyfriend, right, who says, "Hey, I don't want to be with you anymore," and you might be really unhappy about it. And then 6 months later, you meet the real love of your life, and you're like, "Thank you, person 6 months ago that you broke up with me, because now I was free for that person." And I think you will see that a lot with successful business leaders and others, that there will often be an inflection point, something that went wrong, right? So almost bankruptcy or something like that. But then that point became the inflection point for something positive, where they look back and say, "Thank you that happened." And so I think a lot of times it's up to us to actually frame and meaning make situations in a way that we realize, you know what, even if the situation presents itself as a danger, it might actually become something that turns out okay. And that's the opposite of toxic positivity, right? Toxic positivity is saying everything is great. No, life is hard. Life is painful. We just lost our house in the wildfires. Our whole community was burned down in LA, right? It's all gone. That's painful. Like we feel pain every day. And at the same time, the question then is, okay, what's coming next? What can we control now? And what can we do from here? And I think that's kind of the important thing, the kind of meaning making in context.
Professor, what are some small practical steps that listeners can start implementing today to cultivate more serendipity in their lives?
Sorry, serendipity in the
In their lives.
well, I think a lot of the kind of things that you can do immediately and that kind of come there. It's I think, what kind of communities do you put yourself in, right? So I think a lot of times we have like a couple of people we hang out with and that's there, But I think thinking proactively about what are the things I'm really excited about? Can I plug into communities, right? Is there a local university where I can plug myself into public events, sit there, and then maybe ask the first question so that then actually I start becoming part of a conversation somewhere with people where a lot of kind of serendipity might happen. So I'm a big fan of not only thinking about mindset as we did so far, but also thinking about networks that you create yourself, being it virtual or being it local.
Professor, my last question. Are there any upcoming projects or research areas you are currently exploring related to serendipity and innovation?
Yeah, I'm very curious at the moment about the opposite of serendipity, the idea of Zen-blendity, so bad luck by design. And we just had the wildfires here in Los Angeles, where a whole neighborhood, thousands of houses just burned down. And when you look at those kind of situations, on one hand, they are unexpected in the moment they happen, but also by design, it was just a matter of time that something was happened somewhere. And so it's kind of that interesting question, then how do you break out of those kind of potential vicious cycles, and what do you learn about preventing that misfortune in the future? And so I think there's an interesting connection between serendipity and Zen-blendity, and how you kind of design for serendipity and design against Zen-blendity.
Listeners, as we wrap up this enlightening conversation, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Professor Christian Busch for sharing his invaluable insights on serendipity, innovation, and purpose-driven leadership. His work has not only reshaped how we understand luck, but also provided us with practical strategies to cultivate serendipity in our personal and professional lives. From the fascinating research he has conducted to the powerful stories he has shared, it's clear that serendipity isn't just about chance. It's a skill we can develop and leverage to create meaningful opportunities. His book, The Serendipity Mindset, serves as a remarkable guide to unlocking the hidden potential in the unexpected, and I encourage everyone to explore its wisdom. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. Professor Bush, it has been absolute honor to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for your time, your expertise, and for inspiring us to embrace the art and science of creating good luck.
Thank you so much for the wonderful questions, and it was an absolute delight to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.